and welcome to the A Cherry on Top YouTube channel. I'm Jessica, and today's video is for our September YouTube Pop, where this month we are focusing on some of our favorite techniques. And one of my all-time favorite techniques is adding texture paste over a stencil and then watercoloring on top of it. I'll show you a few examples of some pieces that I've made in the past, and then we'll get into the process video. I really love using this technique. It's really pretty and it's pretty simple to do. So there's a few of the examples, and now let's get started on my new page. I like to start with this cold press watercolor paper, and it's 12 by 12, which is perfect for creating layouts. And I like using it for one because it's watercolor, so when I add watercolor to it, it'll hold that color really nicely. And then also it's just a nice thick background to work on. And now I'm working on applying some texture paste. Right now I'm using the volume paste from Stamperia, and really any type of texture paste will work. If you want to use a colored texture paste, that is also fine for this technique as well. I'm using the Crisp Autumn Air stencil from Echo Park, and it is just a 6x6 stencil, so I have to go around and move it and set it down, so I'll end up doing it 4 different times, which does create some seams, but typically after I get going with adding the watercolor on it, as well as layering all of the other pieces from my page on here, I don't really notice the seam, so I don't make that big of a deal of it. I always apply texture paste with a palette knife. I think it's a lot easier, and I can also get a much more even spread throughout the stencil. I let this dry for about an hour. If you don't want to wait an hour, use a heat tool to heat it up, and that'll speed that process along a little bit. So after I waited, now I'm trimming it down a little bit because I decided I want to use one of the pattern papers from the collection that I'm using as a border. And I'm going for a fall/Halloween layout. So I'll be using the Prima Twilight collection. So you can see that peeping out in the top left corner a little bit. And I'm using some of the colors that are in that collection to watercolor this. Although it mostly looks like one shade of orange, I have a little bit of a lighter orange that almost looks yellow. I also added some gold paint in here as well, and then some little touches of brown, but it's mostly that nice light orange color. And what I think is really cool is that the texture paste kind of works as a resist, so it doesn't hold all of the watercolor that the paper does. So I just love this technique because I think it's so easy and it looks so cool and it's different every time. Let me know what you think of this technique, or if you've tried it before, or if you've seen my other videos where I've done it before. If you look throughout our channel, I'm sure you'll find it a few more times. Now I'm getting into the decorating, and this paper had this fun pumpkin and all of these other little pumpkins, so I'm adding that, and then I'm taking some acetate leaves from 49 and Market and using them to add some foliage behind my photos. And these are some photos of me actually when I was probably 3 years old, and I've been going through my older photos lately and trying to use them up, so here I am using them. When I use older photos and I don't know if I have other copies, I like to mat them. So say if I want to take them off of this layout eventually, or if I end up not liking the layout, I can easily cut them off of their mat. And then I also try not to layer glue and stuff like that on top of the photos. So you'll see I'll create some layering with that little pumpkin cluster I have at the bottom. And what I'll do is, because I still want it popped up, I'll add some foam, but I won't put the sticky part of the foam on the photo. I'll just leave the protective backing on it. This layout has some more vintage vibes to it, so I added some crumpled up book paper just to add another layer and a little bit more texture around my photo cluster. So now it's time to stick everything all together. I'm starting by distressing this watercolor paper, and then I'm also curling it, and I'm curling it more in the center so it'll go out to a point on the corners. And now I can start seeing how everything will look once I get it put together. Now I'm going to pop up the photos on some cherry tape foam, and this is the 1-inch foam. So I love adding this on my photos. I think it just adds some more dimension to them and helps keep the photos as the focal point. And then to apply the watercolor paper, I'm using just the regular 2-inch cherry tape. I like using this over wet glue because I think I would just go through so much wet glue, and using the tape just is quick and easy for me. Now, when I'm gluing down these acetate leaves, I don't want them completely covered with acetate, so I'm just gluing a little bit on their stems, and I think that'll be enough to hold them in place in my page protector. So really you don't need a lot of glue for these. And also when you add a lot of glue, I think they lose some of the dimension that you gain with using them. So now I'm going to add on some foundry wax. And so I first covered up my photos because I didn't want any wax on there. And then I just sprinkled it out of the jar directly onto the page. This would have been good to do before I added the acetate leaves because they are plastic, so once I started heating up the wax dots, the leaves started to curl and they wanted to melt. I was able though to pull them away enough to not have them completely melted, but they did get a little bit more warped. So if you're doing the wax, try to do it before the leaves. But I didn't think of it till then, and I thought that some touches of gold would be just perfect and just what this layout needed. So you can see how I'm adding my cherry dots. I am doing a double layer of them for the places that isn't on the photo, and then just one layer where it will be on the photo. And then, like I mentioned before, you can see I left on the protective side, so I'm not sticking anything actually on the photo. A lot of times I just print out photos that I've had on my phone, and I'm not as careful with those. I'll put foam on them because I can always reprint them. And then the last finishing touches is to add some honeybee gems, and then that is it for this page. Make sure to check out all of the other videos in the hop and leave a comment on the videos for a chance to win a $15 Cherry on Top gift card. Thanks for watching!